Okay, for this, you're going to need you need to have Lightroom installed on your phone, and we're just going to do one really simple thing in Lightroom. So once you're ready and you have all your items laid out on your desk, you're going to go ahead and launch Lightroom. And we're just going to take the photo here in Lightroom, and then we're going to jump right onto the desktop. So I'm going to go ahead and press on the camera icon. And I want you to take these photos. So I've got 3 items laid out here on my desk. I have here an album cover. So you know what, if you have a CD, that's fine. If you don't have music as a like a hard copy of music, you can do a couple of books and then a magazine cover. But I just want you to look at 3 layouts and just kind of, and I want you to, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be analyzing the composition of the layout. So it doesn't have to be a great photo, but it's helpful if you shoot it in decent quality light. So you can see here, I'm shooting it by my window, and I have the blinds pulled down just so there's no shadows going across the items. And then I don't want you to shoot it straight on. So shoot it on a bit of an angle. And I'm going to show you how you can fix that really easily in Lightroom. It's a nice tool. I've noticed with a lot of your photos that you guys took in the galleries that a lot of you didn't shoot your photo straight on. You shot it at an angle. And so you didn't have a straight on shot. And I'll show you how you can fix that really easily. Sometimes you don't notice it when you take the shot, and then afterwards you're like, I'd like to look at that straight on, and it's harder to do it later. But with the tool on Lightroom, it's pretty easy. So I'm just going to shoot this one, and I'm going to shoot it at a bit of an angle, and I'm just going to take that shot. And you know what, when you're there, make sure you shoot the other ones. So here I got this magazine layout. It's a relaunch of a magazine called Uppercase that used to be a typography magazine, and now it's kind of an arts and crafts magazine. So go ahead and shoot that one. It's got a nice layout, some ideas on how to get an idea. And for the, let's hope this one comes back. I think I may have lost it. Oh, good, it came back. Okay, so the last one I have here, this album cover, is super simple by Sly, and I'm going to do the front, and I'm also going to do the back too, because this is helpful from a layout point of view. So if you have a really, really simple album cover, shoot the back as well, because it'll allow you to analyze more of it. And you know what? Don't worry too much about shooting it straight on. Just as long as it's all in the frame, go ahead and shoot it. All right, so that's it. And then we're just going to, so again, when you're shooting this, make sure that you're shooting on Pro. You want a DNG image, and from there on, it should be okay. Okay, so now you're just going to switch over to your desktop and go ahead and open Lightroom on your desktop, and your images should show up pretty quickly. I'm just going to show you one, and really, apart from maybe a slight correction to the exposure, I really just want you to take the time to fix the geometry, because we're going to be analyzing the layout of these covers. So what you're going to do is you're going to go over here to the, you go to the top, that opens up, go ahead and click on auto, and that might correct the exposure a little bit. Don't worry about it too much, because we're more not so much interested in the color at this point as the layout. So again, make sure that you've chosen layouts that have the items listed in the requirements. Otherwise, it's up to you. You can choose whatever you want. And so here, what we're going to go do is go to the very bottom, and it might be easier to see this if I collapse all these other items here, and I collapse light, color, effects, detail, optics, and I just want to look at the geometry. So what you're going to do here is you're going to grab this icon here. I've lost my highlight around my cursor. There it is. So you're going to grab this icon here. It's like a 2 vectors crossing. You're going to click on that. And then what you're going to do is you go to your image. And all you're going to do is click click and drag, and Lightroom gives you the opportunity to have 4 vectors. So one on each side. So this is really just to straighten out your layout. And because it is a 2-dimensional piece of art, there is a bit of a 3rd dimension here. I'm not super worried about it. I'm more interested in just getting it straight to make my work easier once I'm in Illustrator. And if you don't get right onto the corner, it's easy to do it over. Just drag over like that. And make sure you're right at the corners. And you should get a pretty accurate squared off image. You know what? This cover really doesn't have this this wiggly line on it. That's really because I was seeing it in you know, the dust cover is a little bit worn. So I've loaned it to a lot of people. It's one of my favorite books, and dust cover is a little bit worn, and so the paper has worked a bit. But don't worry about it too much, because we're really just interested in this layout, and I'm going to ignore the wavy line and the type because I know it's just a result of me shooting the layout on an angle. And again, you know what? This is just all this is Lightroom has added a tag to your file. So you've opened if you shot it in DNG, this is a raw format image. It's like a negative, and it doesn't increase the file size by doing this kind of thing. All that Lightroom is doing is adding a tag to your image and saying that adjust the geometry of this image. That's it. You know, if you are shooting with low resolution, you'll have some issues with pixelization up around here. It's not going to happen if you're shooting raw. And if you're not super happy with the exposure, you're welcome to take a minute and fix that. Again, we don't want anything that is adding. You don't want anything that's adding something to this cover. You're just trying to get a more accurate representation of it. And this is actually pretty accurate. It might be a little bit underexposed up in here, but not that much. It's actually pretty close to what the actual book cover looks like. So, you know, I'm just going to show you this one. So do it for your other 2 items, and then you're just going to go ahead and export this. So from the export screen, what you're going to do is you are going to give your files a name, and you're going to choose where you're going to export to. So for this, what you're going to do is you're going to call it exercise 7 composition GD 101. And here where it says image type JPEG is fine, full size, that's fine. What you're going to do is you're going to reduce the quality. You can reduce the quality quite a bit for the reason that for the purposes, again, of this exercise, you don't need a really high quality image, and it's going to just slow you down if you work with a really large image. So I have 4 images here. I just showed you the geometry correction on one, but you can export them all at once. And when I go ahead and export it, this is where I get the opportunity to create my folders. So under exercises, you're going to create a folder called exercise 7 composition. Inside there, you're going to have a folder called images. And inside of here, you're going to save the images. You can export these images. So go ahead and click export. And it'll take a minute to do that. And then you'll be ready to go in Illustrator. Okay, so in order to do the work in Illustrator, you can either, if you're following along with the tutorial, you're welcome to download this file here from the exercise description. And again, you're not going to submit here. You're going to save it onto your Miro board. I'll show you how to do that at the end. of the tutorial, and you're going to submit it as part of your journal entry number 2. So go ahead and click on this, and you will open it in Illustrator, and it will look something like this. First thing you're going to do is you're going to go in here and you're going to give it your name. So type in your name. So one cool thing about these objects, these type objects in Illustrator, is you can take the text tool and you can go here and you can write a new name on it, but you can also just take your selection tool and double click. You will have more of this set up for you. I'm going to go ahead and click File, Save As, and I'm going to save it to my computer. Go to Exercises. So here under 22.3F, GD 101, Exercises, under Composition. You can see there's nothing here. I've got my images inside there, and I'm going to call this using our naming convention. So your name, first and last name, 22.3F is when, so who, when, and it's exercise 7, and it is compositions, and GD 101. Go ahead and save. Okay, so I'm going to lay out one, see how it goes, and then we'll duplicate the artboard. So I'm just going to go in here, and I want you to put 2 of the images down, one that has the overlays and one that doesn't. So we're going to set up our layers, but the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to import the image. So I'm going to go File, Place, just like we did with the textures exercise. Go here under Images, and I'm going to choose my book cover first, and I'm going to go ahead and place it here. So if you cannot see this image, if your camera scans at a higher resolution and you can't see the edge of the image, go ahead and do this. So you can zoom out and grab one of the corners, but a nice way to do it too is just to change the reference point to the top left, and then where it says width and height, you want to constrain those two, so you want to scale the proportions equally, the width and the height. So go ahead and click on the link there, and I'm just going to do it in half to see where we end up. And I'm going to do it once more, and that fits nicely inside the page here. And I'm going to go ahead and scale this up like this so it fits there. And we're going to be doing some studies of this composition to see what the framing is, what the negative space is, and what the how the designer has created contrast in here. And there's a number of different ways they've done it, and I'm going to be looking to you to identify some of the principles that we've gone through in the course before, because composition is really pulling all those things together and being very intentional about how those things work together. So I'm going to just looking at this thing. The first thing I want to look at is actually, I want you to put your name up here. So go ahead and take the type tool, and here where it says layers, we're going to do all of this on the first layer. If you know what, we're not. This first layer is going to be for images. I'm going to double click on here and call this images. And if you have a lot of stuff around here, you can create a mask for it. I may do that with this image. I'm not super worried about it at this point. I actually may change the scale of this a bit more. But I'm going to go ahead and look at images, and I'm going to create a new layer, and I'm going to call it notes. I'm going to lock this layer so I don't interfere with it. Now I want to take a minute to just look at what is the negative space that we're working at. So the first thing here is the margins. So by the negative space, I mean the margins. So you're going to go ahead and take your tool here, and this is not going to be perfect because I did this photo of this well-loved book I once started working in a chocolate kitchen. I took over a chocolate kitchen actually for a couple years, and it was really easy to identify which was the most important book in the kitchen because it was so worn. So there's something beautiful about a worn book. For this one, I want you to choose magenta. So if you don't have magenta, here under your swatches, you can click here on this kind of palette and switch here to CMYK. And I'm just hitting the tab key to move between these fields. It's a lot faster than moving the sliders. That should give you 100% magenta. Make sure your stroke is this swatch that has a slash through it. And what you're going to do is you're going to change the opacity of this object. So you're going to change the opacity to 50%, and this might change with your with each of your objects. So you have to play with it a little bit, but just change the opacity so you can see through it. You can see what you've done, but you're seeing through it. And once you have multiple objects in here, you may need to change it a little bit. And just make some adjustments. So I'm just going to drag this down to the bottom. And I'm dragging while I'm holding the Option key down, and that makes a copy. And the Shift key constrains it. And here you can see that even if I move my cursor, it is constrained vertically. And so this is making a copy down here. All I have to do at this point is let go of the mouse before I let go of the Option and the Shift key, and it makes a copy. If I let go of the Option key first, it'll move it. And I'm going to take this handle and drag it down, and this is giving me a sense of the margins, so how this designer set up this page. One thing that's interesting about this is this photo is full bleed. So if you look here at Illustrator, if I was designing a book cover with Illustrator, that would be this line here around the edge, which is the bleed. So that means that the image has to go beyond the edge of the print page and it gets trimmed off. I'm going to make another one here, another rectangle, and just drag down. And what I want to do is I want to find out how this designer is setting up their margins. I'm going to do the same with this. Magenta, set the opacity to 50%. And I'm going to click and drag across over here. So it helps me to really pay attention to how the designer set up this page. And you can see they've used different alignments. So this alignment here is different than the alignment of this object at the top. So it's a fairly complex layout, asymmetrical layout that this designer has used. So we have our margins. Now I want to look at these other negative spaces here within the page between the chunks of copy. So we have this piece of copy up here, which is it's like a subhead. And here we have the title of the book, which is Home. And because it's such a common noun, the author and the publisher decided to call it Home, a novel. And here's the name of the author, Marilyn Robinson. And this is kind of one of her selling points, that she is the winner of the Pulitzer Prize. So for the interior negative space, I want you to take a different color. So just go ahead and, so with these objects deselected, choose a different color. And choose any color so long as it doesn't, it's still possible to see through underneath to the rest of the layout. And I'm going to go ahead and look at the space here. And I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to make it 50%. And 50%. And 50%. And there's only one place here where the designer looks at the spacing between lines of copy, and that is here and at the bottom. So I'm going to look at those two separately. I'm going to use another color. And just a contrasting color will do. So here you'll see something really interesting, and that is that some of these letters don't have a descender. So what I'm doing is I'm actually measuring the negative space from the strongest line. So I'm going to measure from the baseline to the top of the X height, and I'm going to actually change this too and measure it the same way. And this is a purely purely visual analysis. It's just me taking the time to look at this and observe and see what these spaces are. So I'm going to do the same with this. I'm going to give it 50%. And I'm going to drag down here. And I'm going to look and see what this space is as well. And that's a very similar space. So another trick with Illustrator is if I want to change the height and the width, the height, both ends of the height at the same time, I'm going to drag while holding the Option key down, and that changes it from the center. So it's like using this tool here, the reference point becomes the center. Drag this up here to the baseline. And these are all caps, so it's easy to see that. Okay, so that is looking at the negative space. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to unlock this. I'm going to lock the notes layer, and I'm going to take this, I'm going to take my selection tool, and I'm going to unlock the images layer, and I click on this image, and I'm going to click and drag it. And again, I'm holding the Option key down and the Shift key, and that is giving me a copy. So now I have a copy of the book that doesn't have the markings on top. And I'm going to use this to identify the hierarchy. So you can see here we've gone outside of the margins, the area that I have to work with, and we're going to scale this a couple of times because every one of your objects is going to be different, and I want you to be able to modify this layout to fit your object. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to drag and select both of these like this. So I'm going to unlock both of my layers, and I'm going to click and drag across like this and let go, and that selects all of the layers including the photos. So you can see here at my layers palette, there's both of these are highlighted, and I'm just going to go ahead and drag this up like this so I can see, so I can put everything inside of here. I'm going to give myself some extra room because I want to put some notes on the side here. So I want to put some notes here, and I want to identify the hierarchy of this layout. So, and by hierarchy, you know what, we're going to look at hierarchy more in depth next class. But with right now, I want you to look at, really it's the scale. So which one comes first, which one comes second, which one comes third, and which one comes fourth. So the scale that the designer used to lay out this page. And any repetition, so anything that's the same. So here we have this word home, and here we have this the name of the author, and then we have the novel. And here you can see there's this reduction in size that happens here. We start large, smaller, smaller. And because these are so similar, you get this repetition here that's happening, that it's almost like they're the same thing, but they're disappearing into space. Kind of this beautiful way of laying out the page. So the first thing that anyone is going to see if they see this is going to be the image. So I'm going to identify that as 1, and I'm going to call it the image. And I'm going to make this number 1. So 1. And by this I mean the hierarchy or the scale from first to last. So with this selected here, I'm going to take my line segment tool, and I am going to just draw a line onto the center of the image. I'm going to go to my properties. I'm going to give this a value. So I'm going to give it a color. I'm going to choose magenta because it's going to be easiest to see. And I'm also going to go here to stroke. And here you can see under stroke we have some other options that we can look at. So one is we can look at the weight. We can make this different types of dashed lines. But we can also add these things called arrowheads, and really it's just a beginning and an end. So what I want you to do with this one is to choose the dot, because the dot is going to land on the image, and here because of the direction that I drew the line, the position is flipped. So I'm going to go ahead and click on this back and forth to swap the arrowheads here. And now you can see this dot is pointing to the center of the image. And if this starts to interfere with other things on the page, I want you to do the same thing with this. So here, for your stroke, you can change the opacity to 50%. If you end up zooming into the page and you get lost, all you do is you go down to here to your artboards and just double click on the number, and that'll zoom you right back out. I'm going to select this here, this image, and I'm going to go to my type tool, to my type palette here, to the character palette, and I'm going to actually go times 0.618, and that'll scale that type down to be a size that makes more sense in relation to the headline of this page. I'm going to give it a fill of magenta, so same thing, 0, 100, 0, and 0. And if you have your default palette here, you can just click on CMYK magenta. If you want to change it, make a different color, you're welcome to do that as well. So take my type tool, so number 1 image. Maybe drag this, it's more centered. Okay, it's okay aligning to the baseline. It's a little bit heavy, so I'm going to reduce the size of this to 0.6. The next thing is going to be the headline. And so what I want to do here is I actually want to turn this off, and that is a new feature that Illustrator just added. So I didn't see that before. So let's turn both these off just to make it easier. Super cool. So I'm going to put a period instead to avoid it defaulting to a, okay, so this is 1, this is going to be 2, and this is the title. And you don't have to be really precise with the names. I just want you to just pay attention to the scale in the composition that you're studying. So here, using the direct selection tool, you can choose one of the anchors, and I just dragged it up. Same idea, holding the Option key down to make a copy, and then I'm going to select this line, click on the anchor again, and drag it up here. And for this one, I'm going to change it to an arrow. Arrowhead, so arrowhead number 5 is the default one. And from here, it's a bit of where your eye goes first. But I would say that probably the intention was Marilyn Robinson to be number 3. here. Oops. So if you drag both, it's because you can see both anchors are selected. You can deselect one of them. And if your image is, if you're accidentally selecting your image, make sure you lock it before doing this kind of editing. It's very easy to accidentally move the image. And if these things ended up getting drawn under here, you'll see you'll see here I accidentally drew all these lines on the images layer. So a couple ways I can fix that, but probably the easiest one is to go look here. So this here is my margin that I drew, and these are the two images. And here I'm just gonna hold my shift key down and select all of these, and I'm gonna actually move them up here. So I'm clicking on the swatch that is beside the title of the layer, and that allows me to drag it up. I'm gonna lock that layer, and now I'm just gonna select this point here and drag it down there like that. So a couple reasons why I want you to do this in Illustrator. And one is that I think my intention for you to do this here in Illustrator is to get you going in Illustrator so that you can do some of the final work on your postcard in Illustrator. And you can do most of your conceptual work. You're welcome to do some of it in Illustrator, but I want you to do most of your conceptual work on paper and then switch over to more precise tools that you can get in Illustrator. So this is some sort of a tagline. Not sure exactly what the book publishing name of that is. And then there's this one here underneath too, which is really important. So, you know, obviously, if you had read Housekeeping in Gilead, home would have a strong appeal. So the designer put that here and put it pretty high, but very visible. Like, I think you'll find a lot that this happens a lot with authors. You know, if they published a book before, that this will show up here, that they're, you know, they publish other books, and then if you've read Housekeeping in Gilead, this would, you know, it would catch my attention. So, changing these to a arrowhead. Okay, go ahead, and there's one more, which is the so I'm not even gonna give this a name because I don't know what you would call it, but it's you know, obviously it's a very big award to win, and so the publisher decided to highlight this one as well. So hopefully this helped you to really consider the composition. And again, this is, you know, this is optional work. So if you did one, that's great. You're working in the C range. So if you met all the requirements and you did one, you're in the C range, C minus to C plus. And if you did all three, then you're working in the A range. So important that you make sure that when you do this, that you're looking at what the requirements are for this. And I missed one actually. I don't think this is actually number 4. I think this is number 4 here, and I missed this one here. So this is part of the title. So I think this is actually number 3. So I'm gonna have to change all my numbers here. But I'm not gonna make you watch. So I'm gonna stop recording and jump ahead to, or I mean, you can jump ahead to wherever I pick up with the next section here. Of course, if you made a mistake yourself, then it's going to be easier. But this is, I think of this as part of the title, because I would read it like that. I think of it as home, a novel. So I'm going to call this 3, and this would move to 4, and this would move to 5, and this would move to 6. And the reason why I think this is number 3 is because, you know, this area here becomes has this kind of circular effect, right? So you have this, the swing of the slide, the swing of the swing. So when the movement of the swing is going to so these lines of copy kind of work with the swing to create this movement around the center. And this triangle created by this is very strong as well. So the last thing I want you to do with this is do that. So I want you to look at the leading lines in the image. If you have a horizon line, that's really important. But I want you to take your line tool, and again, choosing a different color. I'm going to choose cyan for mine, and I'm going to draw across here, because this line here is really important, and it's a particular type of line. And again, if you see this thing happen when you're doing this work, make sure that you call it out. So this one is a line where perceptually we understand that it continues behind the swing, and the same with this line here. So this almost becomes, this plane here, the railing becomes this line that is the foundation for the image. So it's what everything kind of hangs on. Structurally it is, but it's also important from a compositional point of view how this shape here, everything kind of hangs on it. So all these lines come out of here, all these perspective lines, and the pole that is holding up the beam. We understand that this is all like anchored by the deck and the railing. The next thing is this. So click and drag down. So this triangle becomes important too. And so I could do this with the line tool, but I'm going to start with the line tool and switch over to the pen tool. And I'm just going to click here, and here, and here. And here we find that we have this triangle sitting in the center. So thinking about these leading lines and how they guide us through the composition is important as well. And the last one that I think is really important is this line down here. So just the edge of the swing. It's the strongest line in the image, and of course it's a very wide, heavy line. And that is really what I want you to do with this, is identify the scale, look at the negative space, look at the leading lines in the image, and the other one would of course be this one here. So this one, we understand it to go all the way down here like this. And I'm going to do a quick measurement and see if the photographer and the designer were paying attention to this rule of thirds. So I drew this rectangle around the whole book. I'm going to go up here to the top. I'm going to deselect the scale proportions, and I'm going to go to the height, and I'm going to go /3 and see where this lines up. Oh, that didn't work. I'm going to go to the very end here and divide it by 3. There we go. So yeah, you can see here that it looks like what the designer did is the designer put the top of the word home is sitting on a third. And let's see if that's used anywhere else. Doesn't look like it, no. So this space here, this really strong negative space, so this space here, this aggregate negative space, is 1/3 of the size of the book. So what I want you to do is with each of these, put a little note in there, and I'm going to put my notes right on top here, like that. You can see it. So rule of thirds. Change it to magenta. Cyan. And if you can't read it on the book, you can always just drag it off to the side. And I have enough room here on the side to put these things in. If you find you're running out of room, you can do the same thing that you did before, is select everything, make sure that your guide is locked. So selection tool, lock the guides, and you're going to select all of this. If you need more room, just select it all and just scale it till it fits. I think I'm good. So again, each of your images is different, and this can end up being a little bit time consuming, so it's totally up to you where you want to land with your grade here, which ones you do. So, and I will put an example, there will be an example placed for you to see. And for the stroke, I'm going to scale this down to 0.6. This one, and I want you to identify at least 2 kind of gestalt or principles that we've looked at in this class, and you'll always see them. So just point straight to it, draw over it with the overlays, point straight to it, and just put a note in there so that you know what it is. Gestalt, continuation. So this idea, that we understand that the line continues. The other one that I see here is rhythm. So there's some very strong rhythms that come from the texture, the material that's used. So there's definitely some beautiful texture that's used in here. So the wood texture, and even the texture of the paper becomes really important in here. So identifying the texture and identifying the rules of Gestalt, the texture of the wood here becomes important. It gives it this really human feel to it, and the light coming in, the direction of the light from up here. It's a very beautiful photograph. So here, continuation, and then the other one I could identify here is rhythm. So I could, there's rhythm in the slots of the railing, and in the slots in the deck, and as well in the so there's rhythm here. So I have to check that spelling. Okay, 0.6. And then maybe I might draw a couple of these lines just to make it really clear. And the amount of work that you do here is really, if it's really clear, you'll grade you on the clarity. So is the stuff that you're describing clear? Can I understand what you're doing? And you know what, the other thing I want you to make a note of is the alignments. So there is something that's pretty close to an alignment here. So this becomes, this alignment here becomes important, but it's not, I don't want to say it's not intentional, but really it is a symmetrical alignment. So if I take, I want you to do this too, I want you to measure these carefully. So this is the power of working with Illustrator, is you can do these things pretty accurately and get a very good sense for what's going on in a layout this way. So if I draw a box right across the cover, go here to properties, and look and see what the center is. And the center is like right here. This is the center of the book. What I want to do is I want to change the width so that I'm changing both sides at the same time. So in order to do that, I'm going to click and drag across while I hold the Option key down. And you can see what that does. If I let go of the Option key, it'll just do one side. But if I hold the Option key down, it'll do both sides at the same time. And you can see, I guess the slipcase is not exactly positioned properly on the book anymore. It's pretty worn. But it is, this block of text is centered in the layout. So that's the alignment, it's a centered alignment. And for alignment, I want you to choose a different color. So same line segment tool, choose a different color. So I'm going to choose orange, and I'm going to take this center point here. So I'm going to take my selection tool, deselect, selection tool, deselect, and then I'm going to take the line tool, and I'm going to draw it. You can see here, if I hover over the center of my box, I get what the center is of the box here. And if I draw this straight up, you can see that this anchoring text at the bottom is centered, but this is not. So there's this interesting movement that happens, and I think it's inspired by the swing. But actually, I'm gonna keep this box for a minute here. And I'm gonna take this and I'm gonna drag it straight up, and I'm gonna let go right here. And you can see here the same thing. This is centered. So these two blocks of copy are centered in the layout here, but this here is not. So I'm gonna do another box right here. I just want to find what the center is of this block of copy here. And actually, I think it's better if you leave those on there, because then I can understand what you're doing. I really just want to understand what you're thinking as you're looking at this. That's it. And, all these extra lines, they don't do that much for me, but it does help me to understand how you're thinking. So then I just grab this one here and move this up here like this. And you can see here that as I move these, Illustrator is scaling the line. So this is something that you'll run into when you're working in Illustrator. The way to avoid it, if you don't want to scale lines as you're, change the weight of a line as you're scaling the object, go here to your ellipses and you deselect Scale, Strokes, and Effects. And that way you won't scale it as you're scaling them up. You won't scale the weight. So I want to go back to this weight here. I'm just going to take my eyedropper tool. I'm going to hover over another line, and I know I'm hovering over it because it gets highlighted with the color of the layer. I'm just going to click there, and I'm just going to drag this here so it's clear what I'm doing. And so there's this kind of movement like this here, which is important. This movement between the copy, like an S shape, this is kind of gentle, like not very it's not disturbing. It's just this kind of gentle movement across the page. And so I think it's important to kind of think about that, about what these changes in position do to the viewer when they're looking at it. So I'm just going to put this here, and I'm just going to call it alignment. Alignment shifts across page. What you're going to do after you're done is you're going to take this, and so this is the first one, but if you're doing more than one, you're going to want to make a copy of the artboard. So what you're going to do is you're going to take this tool down here, which is called your artboard tool, and you can go here and make sure that all your layers are unlocked. This is very important, otherwise you're going to not copy some things. The other thing you want to do is you want to make sure that your guides are unlocked. So you need to set that with your selection tool and nothing selected. Okay, now you can go to the artboard tool and click. And same as with a shape. You're just clicking and dragging with the Option and Shift key both down, and all you have to do is let go of your mouse first, and it'll make a copy. So same thing, Shift and move, and that'll give me 3 artboards. What I'm going to do is I'm going to call the first one Book, and I'm going to call the second one Vinyl, Album, and I'm going to call the last one Magazine Spread. Magazine Spread. So there's 3, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and take my selection tool, deselect everything, go to my Properties palette, and lock the guides. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to click and drag across here. I'm not going to touch the title, and I'm going to delete. And that gives me the space that I need to do my other analysis. Okay, so I'm going to place those images. So here under images, go ahead and place. So I'm not going to make you watch all of that again. I just forgot the last little part with the artboards. Again, if you were only doing one, you don't have to copy artboards, but it's worth taking the time to see how it's done. Go ahead and save it. If you're going for a C range, you're only going to do one of these, and you're going to go ahead and export it as a PDF. Sorry, no. You're going to save it, and you're going to save a copy. Save a copy. So let's strike that. Save a copy. And here, down here under Format, you're going to go PDF. And so delete the word copy at the end. Go ahead and save. You saw there at the very bottom there was a choice of number of artboards, so just all of them. And here, if you've saved this, it's great. You can go here to GD101 optimized PDF, and that'll set all of this here for you. So you'll deselect preserve Illustrator editing capabilities, and you'll be setting your compression to 150 and automatic JPEG. If you haven't done that, do it. Go ahead. Deselect, preserve, average downsampling to 150, JPEG minimum. Ooh, that's not right. Medium, JPEG, medium, and yeah, so that's good. So I made a mistake when I saved the last one. So I'm going to go ahead and save it as the same thing. So I'm going to go. So again, if you did make a mistake with your preset, you just save it as the same name. I'm not sure why I did that. I think that was a mistake of the software, but we'll see if it happens again. So if you got the name right, you'll know because this warning triangle will appear that the specified preset name is already in use. I know it is. Oh, it doesn't let me save the same one. Okay. So I got to save a new one. Okay. And save PDF. Okay, so again, I'm going to post them all, but what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go to Miro. And just show you how you can place this PDF in Miro with multiple artboards. So I'm just going to go here to our content Miro. If you ever want to change this name, I saw some of you have like odd names up here, and if you name it using your convention, it'll be easier for me. So if you go here to boards, here where it says this is you may have more than one artboard here, or more than one Miro board. Under the ellipses, you can rename it. And again, that's helpful for me because it gets a little bit confusing when I have a whole bunch open. So what you can do here is, I'm just going to go to composition, and I'm going to do this again later when I finish these, but here is, you can see it has multiple artboards and they're not finished yet. So I'm just using the space bar to do the quick view. I'm sure Windows has something similar. And so what I want you to do is I want you to place all the artboards in there. But if you notice here, if I take this PDF and I drag it on there, so you can see here that Miro only put the first page here. But if you look here at the pop-up along the top, so with this selected, you get this pop-up. We've used this ellipsis before. You can see here that it's telling me I can choose which page is displayed. There we go, it's showing the second one and the third one. But the other thing you can do here is you can extract the pages. So this multi-page extraction, pretty cool feature of Miro. If you click on that extraction icon and choose all and extract, that'll extract all the pages. And delete, and make sure you create frames for it. So go ahead and go create frame, create frame, create frame. It doesn't matter if the frames overlap, the pages aren't. But if you do have a white page, it's going to be easier to understand is if you give it no fill. These frames just make it way easier to navigate your Miro boards. And the more content that you put out there, the harder it is going to be for me to navigate. So again, when you're posting a link to an assignment, a submission, make sure that you're copying the link directly from the frame and that you're naming your frame. So this is called exercise 7, composition, and this is called exercise 7, composition 2, 7, composition 3. So lots of steps here. I recognize there's some complexity to it, but it makes being able to assess your work a lot easier, and sharing your work between all your process work, this makes it really easy. So again, you're not going to be submitting this independently, but when you do submit, you're going to submit this as part of your part of the interpret, so your visual research, so part of interpretation for your postcard. And so you're going to include this, so make sure that you organize it with your postcard project. So thanks for watching.